Welcome to Madlit Musings, the podcast where we dive into the minds of authors, exploring the profound realms of faith, social issues, and the delightful world of entertainment. I'm your host, Jamie Jo Wright, and on this literary journey, you never quite know what you're going to get. Hi, everyone. It's Jamie Jo and Foo. Foo is joining me today, my cat. He's sitting on the back of my chair if you are listening and not watching. And then I also have a special guest with me today, Heidi McCahon. How are you, Heidi?
I'm good. How are you, Jamie Jo?
I feel extra chipper this morning. I don't know why. And it seems kind of odd for Friday because we're recording on a Friday. And maybe I'm just compensating for the fact that I'm absolutely exhausted.
Same.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Just kind of one of those things. Well, you're a listener of the podcast, so you know this, but for anybody else joining, the format of this podcast is not the typical interview an author with a series of long questions. It's more like we're sitting down with coffee and we'll talk books, but we don't know where the chat's going to take us. And so you can just kind of journey with us and eavesdrop. That's kind of the format of this podcast. But Heidi, tell me a little bit about you and your writing, because you've never been on the podcast before. So I'm really happy you're here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I love to listen, so it's exciting to be a guest. My name's Heidi McCahon. I live in North Carolina. I have one husband and 3 sons, and
Thanks for the clarification of the
just
numbers.
want to make that clear. And I have a golden doodle who is also a boy, so I'm surrounded. I grew up in Alaska. Long
Oh,
story there, but my
nice.
childhood has turned out to be pretty helpful because I use a lot of my experiences in Alaska to write books set in Alaska.
I like
So,
that.
yeah, I'm primarily a stay-at-home mom, but my
Mhm.
boys are all teenagers now, so it's a new season. I have 1 in college and 2 in high school,
Wow.
and I write a lot of romance novels set in small towns.
That's a great introduction. I love it.
Thank you.
I think I said your name was Heidi McMahon, didn't I?
That's okay. Ironically, I grew up with a Heidi McCahon, and I used to get, like, if she won a track meet and her
Yeah.
prize had to be mailed to her, I would get her prize in the mail, and one time she won a science fair contest, and so I got her prize. It's like, "Hey, Heidi, it's me, Heidi. I need to give you your prize back." So it's funny. It's
Oh,
no worries.
that's really funny. That's really funny. Yeah, I don't know why I said McMahon because I knew it was
It's okay.
McCann, but whatever.
Maybe there
It's
is
like
a Heidi
staring
Mc
at me on the screen here.
It's okay.
McCann.
There
You
you go.
know, it's just kind of one of those things, like you have a long week and everything runs together. And for some reason, I save a lot of my writing to do on Fridays, which is a really
Oh,
bad idea
yeah? Well
because I'm kind of done.
I hear you.
Yep.
I know. Yep.
Yep. Okay, so you write small town romances, a lot of them set in Alaska, and you write for the Harlequin love inspired line, correct?
Yes, that is
Okay.
true.
So how many books are you typically putting out a year?
Well, I would love to crank out 4 a year, but I'm not quite there yet.
Okay.
So far, I probably write 3 a year, but
Hmm.
2 get published. I
Okay.
basically have a book published every 6 months
Every
right
6
now,
months. That's
but I'm
awesome.
starting to write for the trade line. I've
Yes.
written 1 and my second one comes out next year, so that will change things 'cause spoiler alert, it takes a long time to write 100,000 words. I had no
It
idea.
does. It does. They're a little bit different. So, yeah, tell us, for readers who aren't aware of it, Harlequin has come out with a trade line now. So there is a difference between the littler paperback copies that you'll see like at Walmart and through their club, and then there's the trade. So kind of help readers understand what that is.
So for us, that's a difference in word count. We still measure
Hmm.
things in word count in publishing, we
Yeah,
just do, but
we do.
the standard love-inspired book and the love-inspired suspense book is 55,000 words. That's like
Hmm.
200 pages in paperback form. And then
Right.
the trade length are the longer books designed to be competitive in the marketplace, to be
Hmm.
perfectly honest. And so
Hmm.
it's 100,000 words, which that's like 350 pages in a
Yep.
paperback. It's a
Yep.
larger book, and we are tackling what I would say are more complex themes. So for me personally, I can have 3 points of view. So
Okay.
for me, so far, that's been like a mom and a daughter or 2 sisters' points of view, and then the hero still gets a point of view
Okay.
because it's a romance. But my first one was women's fiction set in Alabama, and my
Oh.
second one is a rom-com set in Alaska. So I
Oh.
just went way to the other end of the spectrum to me. So we'll
Yeah.
see how that goes. It
Yeah.
was not my idea. They asked me to
Oh,
write a
okay.
rom-com set in Alaska. I was like, "All right, here we
Why
go."
not? Why not? I would think that would be a big thing though, because Alaska always seems to be a place that's like it's a destination place for readers.
Yes, for
And then
sure.
rom-coms are just always fun to have around. So
Yes, and my editor explained to me that there are lots of different ways to define a rom-com. She
mhm.
doesn't necessarily have to trip and spill her coffee and run into the hero. You can have sort of a slapstick kind of
Yes.
comedy, but also witty banter, and
Mhm. Mhm.
they can have great senses of humor. So a
Yeah,
lot of romance is sort of in the rom-com
yeah. That's
family right
fun.
now.
I like that. I like that.
Yeah.
So the love inspired are the 55,000 word, and then we have the trade, which is 100,000. Do you find you prefer one or the other, or are they both
I
equally as fun to write?
They are fun to write. The trade length, I did start out self-published, but I wrote more in like the 75,000
Okay.
word range,
Yep.
so having to add in enough complexity and enough
Mhm.
interesting content to get to 100,000, that is hard for me, and so my
Yeah.
editor had to help me, and then I missed some things. There's some
Mhm.
plot holes that had to be filled in, so the real work happened for me in the
Okay.
revising stage, so
Yeah.
I feel like I kinda let the horses run if you give me more words, and
Mhm.
the
Mhm.
longer I live, the more I find things that I wanna write about, like,
Yeah.
I have a friend that's incarcerated. I didn't ever think that that would be a passion of mine, but all of a sudden, I have a heart for incarcerated people, so
Yeah.
I'm probably not gonna write a lot of books with a felon in them or a convicted felon, but just
Mhm.
sort of the themes around that, like redemption, second chances.
Right.
You know what I
Right.
mean? I'm starting to
Yep.
see not everything that I wanna write about is gonna fit in a 200-page book, but I
Right.
also like to sell books, and so I rely on the team at Love Inspired to tell us,
Yeah.
"Hey, here's what seems to be trending. Here's what readers like."
Yeah. Yeah.
So
That's
it's a
fun.
balancing act.
That's cool. It's fun that you get to kind of dabble in both worlds too. Um,
Yes.
and I just like I was telling you before I hit record, I just finished my first love inspired suspense book that comes out in August. Um,
Yay.
and I was thinking, okay, this is going to be so easy compared to writing the 100,000 word books that I'm doing for Bethany House that have all these different layers and twists and turns. And this is more of a straightforward suspense. It was so much harder. I
I
could
think it
not
is
believe how
hard.
much harder it was to write a shorter
Yes.
book.
I think it is hard, and also, if you told me I had to write a short story today, I would probably cry. Like,
I
I
was
feel
gonna
like
say
the
I would cry.
shorter it gets, the harder it
Yeah.
is because you don't have very much wiggle room.
No. No,
So
you don't. I started out writing novellas. A novella was my first published work. And 20,000 words, you're like at 15,000 and you feel like you just started the story and you're like, "Oh shoot,
yes.
I have to wrap it up." It's
Right.
crazy. It's weird.
Yep, and if it's a romance, how in the world are they gonna fall in love? So then
Right?
it's like they had to
Thank
have known
you.
each other before and
Mhm.
what happened, and
Mhm.
yeah, it's hard.
Yeah. Yeah.
Writing is hard, people.
It is hard. It is hard. So all of you readers, love on your authors. Love on your favorite
That's right.
authors.
That's
Leave
right.
them reviews, share their books, tell out the
Yes.
world about them. It's
And
great.
if you read our book in a day, don't tell us. I'm just kidding.
No, no, tell us it takes like 6 months to read our book, not
That's
because
right.
they're boring, but because they're just so good it takes that long to devour
That's
them.
right. Yeah, if you wanna say I couldn't put it down, that's amazing. I wanna hear that all the time, but if you're like, "Oh,
Right.
I read it in a day." Okay.
Oh, okay. Well, that took me a lot longer to write. Thank you. No.
Yeah.
Oh, that's funny. So, tell me a little bit about Alaska. So, you grew up in Alaska. Why? Were you
That's
born
a
there
that's a
or
valid question. No, and what I'm
okay.
gonna tell you is all true.
Okay.
My grandparents, my great-grandparents are all from a small town north of Philadelphia.
Okay.
My parents met and fell in love at a Bible study. My
Okay.
dad went to college, my mom went to nursing school. After that, he convinced her to marry him and move to Alaska to serve as missionaries.
Oh,
So, what an adventure. They
okay.
went to Alaska, gosh, 1970 maybe, and they served for a small time, in a small village, and it was hard.
Mhm.
That's just a hard life, and
Yeah. Yeah.
missionary community is pretty vibrant in Alaska because before it became a state, every religious organization wanted representation there. So
Mhm.
the idea of going to Alaska to convert somebody wasn't really a new idea, but
Okay.
it's just hard and it's really
Yeah.
cold and it's really dark. And so I'll condense the story, but they left and went back to, we call it outside the lower 48. They went back to where their
Okay.
parents were and tried to have like normal jobs. They had my sister and myself, and then they went back to Alaska, and my grandparents helped them buy a business. Now, we
Mm.
call it a lodge in Alaska, but I just want to be very clear. It's kind of like a convenience store on the side of
Oh,
the road.
okay.
And then
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
dad my dad built a campground. There were some cabins there that he fixed up.
Cool.
We generated our own power with generators and
Mhm.
had well water, so it's kinda off the grid, but we had a lot of tourists because the highway went, like, right past our front door, so I
Okay.
grew up with, like, 12 buses a day with people pouring through, and we sold them T-shirts, and they used the restroom, and
Okay.
pie and cookies, but
Sure.
my kitchen table was, like, right there on the other side of the counter, so it was a little bit of a fishbowl existence, and my
Yeah.
bedroom was just down the hall, and then I could go outside and play, and my grandparents were almost always around, and so really a fascinating way to grow up, and I knew
Yeah.
that other people live differently because first, my sister went to school,
Mhm.
and we lived an hour from the school, and so I knew there were other people out there that had a different experience than mine, and we'd go to Colorado to see my cousins, but it's a wild way to grow up.
Yeah.
So, I
Yeah.
stayed there all the way in through high school, and then I went to college in Spokane, Washington, which is, mid-sized American
Right.
city.
Right.
And then I gradually moved across the nation. I went to Tennessee and then to North Carolina, and I was an athletic trainer at a large
Okay.
university, so a lot of ankle taping and
Yeah.
handing out ice bags, and
Yeah.
I have always wanted to be a writer, but just didn't quite know how to make it happen. So, yeah,
But you did.
I did eventually. Yes.
That's good. Yeah. How many books
Yes.
have you written then?
I have some that I've written that will never see the light of day, but
Don't
I
we all?
yes, have a few on my hard drive that will not come out. I believe my 16th novel was just released if you count
Awesome.
my
Okay.
indie publications
Oh,
and then
absolutely.
what I've done with Harlequin. Yeah.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's good. Well,
Yeah.
congrats. And the whole Alaska thing, like I really want to go to Alaska. I've not been to Alaska
You
and
should.
I really
You
want
should.
to go. I really
Yeah.
do. I do. It's not easy to get to.
It's not, and it's also huge. Like,
Yeah.
I grew up in one little part, and I've been kind of in a radius around there, but there are
Mhm.
parts I've never seen. Like, the parts that you see when you take a cruise, I've never seen there. There's no roads to those
Oh,
parts.
interesting. Yeah, I suppose
The
that makes
part that
sense.
sort of curves down toward Canada, I want
Yeah.
to see all of that. So
Yeah.
I wanna take a cruise to Alaska because
All right.
there's a lot to
Let's
see.
do it. Let's
Let's
book it.
do it.
Heidi
Alright.
and Jamie go on a cruise. We'll do a new podcast
Okay,
and we'll
sounds
just
good.
podcast every day from the ship. I think that would
Mhm.
work.
Maybe someone would sponsor it. That'd be
I
great.
was just gonna say, let's do a Kickstarter campaign.
I
That
like
would
it.
be fun. That would be fun. I want to go to Alaska. I want to go on a dog sled. I know that's
That
probably
is
stereotypical of Alaska, but I do want to go on a dog sled.
so a lot of people tell me that when they go to Alaska, their favorite thing is to go and see the people who professionally mush and to
Hmm.
hold the husky puppies, and I was just like, "Really? I never would have thought of that. Okay, great."
Yeah. It's just not something you get in the lower 48.
No, it's not. It
I mean,
yeah.
and I live in Wisconsin, so we have a lot of snow here.
Yeah.
And I might be ignorant, but I don't hear about dog sledding in this
People
area.
from Minnesota tend to have dog teams because 'cause they'll come to Alaska
Okay.
and compete in the
Okay.
races, but I've never heard of anyone from Wisconsin who
Mm-mm.
does. So,
Yeah.
huh.
Yeah. So I don't know. I have a friend actually who's also a love inspired suspense author, Sarah Varland.
Mhm.
And she lives in Alaska and that's what
Right.
she does for fun. And so she keeps saying, you need to come and go on a
Wow.
dog sled. And I'm like, I know. I
Field
do.
trip to Sarah's house.
I'm
Look out,
thinking, and
Sarah. We're
if I,
coming.
now that I'm writing love inspired suspense, I'm thinking maybe I could write off the trip as research
For sure.
and set a book in Alaska and make everybody who grew up in Alaska mad at me because I totally, you know, wreck the Alaskan landscape and everything because I
By
don't know
the
what
way,
I'm walking.
we do get mad about that.
I know.
Speaking
I
as an Alaskan, I've lost
Yeah,
my stuffing on more than one occasion
I'm
about
sure you
a
have.
piece of artwork that poorly portrays my state.
It's one of the things I remember when I was getting into writing, I would talk to several writers and they're like, the whole concept where it's like, write what you know. They're
Mhm.
like, write a place that you know. Like, if you're not from Georgia and you're from North, like I am in Wisconsin, don't write about Georgia. It's its own culture, it's its own
Yeah.
slang.
Yep.
We don't call soda in Georgia pop like you do in
Nope.
Wisconsin. And so I've learned to just pick places that I know well enough that I feel
Mhm.
I'm not going to irritate somebody too much.
There you go. I think for Alaska books, I think the broader audience wants a certain reading experience. So I think
Mm,
people that aren't from there or haven't been there can write about it successfully. And there's plenty of people that do. Lots of
yeah.
love inspired authors put books set in Alaska. And I don't think they've ever been, or maybe have only
Oh,
been one
interesting.
time, but
Yeah.
I think Alaska people want they want what they think about Alaska. They sort of
Mhm.
want that perpetuated. And I'm always like, but that's not how it happens. It's hard. It's one of the
So
harder things I've had to deal with.
that is interesting. That is because I'm sure there's probably a lot of perceptions of Alaskan life that is completely erroneous.
Yes.
What would you say are like some of the biggest misconceptions?
So the question that I get asked here, I've lived in North Carolina, gosh, almost 20 years. So the first question I'm always asked is it dark there all the time? Well, no.
No.
No, it's not because well, the way that the way that the universe works, that's not possible, but
Right.
it is dark a lot in the wintertime. Yes, I went to school in the dark and came home in the dark, but
Mhm.
then in the summer it's light all the time. And I'm
Right.
like, "What?" Like I don't think you can understand it unless you've lived it,
Right.
but
Right. It is weird. It is weird because I'm kind of like the concept of having a continual darkness um, seems a little bit depressive, but then the concept of being always light also seems depressive to me because I'm like, I want to
yes.
go to sleep and I want it to be dark.
Right. So if you live there, I think your body's circadian rhythm just adjusts. But if
Okay.
you don't live there, it's hard to get used to. Because I would
Yeah.
go to college in Washington State, which is different than Alaska,
Right.
and then
Yeah.
come home and it's already light all the time. And I'm like, whoa.
Yeah.
So it
Yeah.
is something you have to adjust
Right.
to. But
And I'm
we
going to,
don't we
no, go
don't have
ahead.
igloos. We don't
What?
igloos aren't
Oh, come
legit.
on.
We don't ice fish from our front yard.
Really?
Like, no.
Oh,
Mm-mm.
shucks. You're just ruining Alaska for, no, I'm just kidding.
I know. But I'm sure there's
You don't
things.
have bears for pets?
There are a lot of bears, but never as a pet.
Now, I think one misconception that I've heard is that you have polar bears in Alaska.
There are polar bears way up in the Arctic, like,
Right.
way past the Arctic Circle, but they can't
They're not really in
go.
like
I
Alaska, like civilized Alaska, I guess. That sounds
I can
horrible.
think of one time where I was sent to go play either a basketball or a volleyball game in a
Okay.
village in the Arctic, and they said, "We would love to give you a tour of the village, but it's 55 below zero, and there is a polar bear roaming through town, and
Oh.
he is hungry. So
Oh.
we cannot, your parents, your principal, all of the people back at your hometown would not be happy with us if we exposed you to that danger. And so, who wants to go outside in 55 below anyway? Like, I'm
I
playing an
know,
indoor
but
sport here,
there's
but
a
I did
part
wanna
of
see the bear. I did wanna see
there's
the bear, but
yeah,
they wouldn't let
and there's
us.
a part of me that's like, if you're gonna die, do it interestingly.
Right,
So, I mean, hypothermia in -55 is one thing, and then to be
right,
eaten by a polar bear, I mean, that's just epic.
right. And I was, like, 16, and I was thinking, "Well, I can think of some people here that I wouldn't mind if he ate." Like, I just won't be the closest one to the bear. Come on. There's, like,
Yeah.
50 of us here.
I
Come
can
on.
run faster than these
That's
other people, so I'm
that's
not
right.
gonna be the one that gets eaten.
Right,
Oh,
but
man. Oh, wow.
yes,
That's
but
hilarious.
yeah, I don't think as a general rule, like, ideally, I think polar bears stay on the ice near the Arctic
Yeah.
Ocean because that's where their food is, but
Right.
yeah.
Right. So, can you see Russia?
I also get that question. Thanks so much, Sarah Palin. That's a quote that will never die.
No, it
Um,
won't.
I could not see Russia, but I was in South Central Alaska, so
Oh,
very,
okay.
very
Well,
tricky, but
there you go. My son actually asked me the other day. He goes, "If we go to Alaska someday, can I just look across and see Russia?" I'm like, "Dude, it's not that close. Like, I mean, it's close, but it's not that close. It's not a lake."
no. To be honest, I haven't been to that western part of
Okay.
Alaska, Nome, and so I don't know what
Yeah.
you see when you're there. I mean,
I
maybe.
don't think you can actually like see Russia. Maybe there's little strips of land or something, but I don't think
Maybe.
it's I mean, you're not looking over onto the Kremlin. Let's just put it that way.
No, you're not gonna nope.
No, and you're not in St.
Vladdy's not gonna be waving.
No, no,
Like
no, no. Okay, so back to your books because we have way squirreled.
It's
Um,
fine.
but that's what we're good at here at
Yep,
Madlit
that's right.
Musings. That's why it's called Madlit because it doesn't make
Right.
sense. It's just
We are
madness.
right on track as
We
far as
are
I'm concerned.
totally, totally on track with the mission of this podcast. But are all of your love inspired novels set in Alaska? Is that kind of like a theme, or do you kind of pop around to different places?
Right now, they're set in Alaska because that has sold fairly well for me,
Sure. Yeah.
and I think because I did grow up there, I think, it's
Hmm.
a little easier for me to write those books. I entered a contest, and
Okay.
because I lived in North Carolina, the idea for that book was set here in North
Okay.
Carolina, so my first one was North Carolina, and then I did 3 set in Colorado,
Okay.
and then I said, "Do you wanna see more in Colorado, or could I do something in Alaska?" And she said, "Oh, let's try Alaska," and so here I
Awesome.
am.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So people can really get the true Alaskan romance because you're going to be extremely authentic because you have credibility.
Yes, I mean, it's all fiction, but yes, I feel
Yeah.
like it's pretty authentic to what
Yeah.
life in Alaska is like in the small towns.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And so then the one that's coming out next February is the longer trade, and that's set in Alaska as well, but it's a rom-com, correct?
Yes, and they asked
Okay.
me to pick a new setting with a whole new cast of characters.
Oh, okay.
So,
You really got to
okay. I
from
said, "Okay."
scratch. Do
So,
you make up the locations? Like, do you have a fictionalized town or do you actually use real towns?
it is a real place, but I just changed the name
Okay.
and don't ever tell anybody what
Shh, you did not hear it here
I
at
mean,
Madlet Music.
yeah, I grew up in Valdez, and so a lot of
Yeah.
what I wrote was based on my experience there, but now I'm writing an inland setting, and so I kind of do, like, towns around Fairbanks, around Denali,
Okay.
so
Oh,
I
yeah, yeah.
I just make up my own name, and yeah.
Fictionalize it. Sometimes
Yep.
it's easier to do. I do that too. Like, I'll use a small town that I'm familiar with as the base, but I
Yes.
usually slap on a fictional name just so I don't make anybody upset if I do incidentally make an error.
Right, and I found that if you try to use the real place, someone will tell you, "There's no stop sign there.
Right.
There's not a bank on that corner," and
Right.
I have not been back to Alaska in 20 years, and so I have to go look at photos that people have posted on
Yeah.
Facebook who are there, or I have to,
Yep.
look find some kind of research on the internet, so it's easier just to make up a fake town.
I think that's smart. All right. So if readers want to follow you, get to know you, see your books and all of that, how do they do that?
I'm most active on Instagram,
Okay.
HeidiMcCahon.author, and then you can always look at my website,
Mhm.
HeidiMcCahon.com. I keep
Awesome.
that fairly well updated, and then I do use Facebook quite a bit as
Okay.
well because that seems to be where the readers hang out.
Yeah. A lot of them are there. No doubt. Well, this has been a blast. Um,
Yes.
and I'm looking forward to your trade coming out next year. I think that's going to be fun
Thank you.
to see that.
Thank you.
And there are a lot more trades coming out from Harlequin in the clean, faith friendly fiction. So anybody who wants to check out those, I know there's suspense, there's some women's fiction, etc. So it's a cool opportunity.
Yes, and there's a really sweet Christmas one coming out by Catherine Springer. Should be out, well,
Okay.
after this airs, it won't be
Yeah.
too long.
Yeah.
Christmas at Spruce Hill Farm, I think. Anyway, I got to read an early copy. It's super sweet.
Oh,
People will
that's
love it.
awesome. I love it. That's good. And you need those feel good ones when Christmas is coming. I always like
Yes.
those. It's just nice to have
Yes.
something fun to read. So. Well, Heidi, thank you so much for being with us today. This was a blast talking about Alaska and romance and books. Let's do it
Thank you,
again.
Jamie Jo. Yes, it was so fun. Thanks so much.
Thank you for joining Madlit Musings, where every conversation is a journey and every book is a new adventure. Subscribe now on your favorite podcast player or check us out on YouTube, and let's explore the fascinating intersection of faith, society, and storytelling together.